Hi, guys. It's our weekly PowerPoint review. We are trudging along here. Before I get started, I just was kind of reflective this morning, thinking about how hard I know a lot of you guys are working and how much stress in a different way this puts on yourself, on your parents, your siblings, um, your house, and know that I too feel that stress, and um, in a few weeks, at least for us, it should be a little bit better when we're done with that AP exam. And I think maybe next year you're going to be a little bit more resilient when tough times come our way. We're all going to know how to handle them maybe a little bit better. Um, I just wanted to applaud you all. Anybody that's been coming to the Zoom meetings, thank you for hanging in there, for taking some time to say class is important. And for those of you who can't make the meetings, but you're following along these PowerPoints, thank you to you. Congratulations to all of you doing what you can do, and you should feel pretty proud about that. And I'm very proud of it. And I wish I could see you all and give you a big old hug, but I can't. So let's get started with our today's Zoom meeting. So we are covering, I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint, the methods packet, and we're on pages 7 and 8, cruising along here. So with that being said, this was another doozy. I just think that they make them so long, terribly long. I highlighted some things that I thought were kind of important when it comes to when I read it for the very first time. I believed that the point where they said believes that frustration increases the need for achievement. In my head right away, I was thinking, okay, that's going to be kind of important. She believes this, and it's telling me something. As I was dividing up the groups, I've got an easy puzzle group and she's rating them. I've got a difficult puzzle group that Jim is rating. These are all things that before I even get started and looking ahead at what the question is asking, I kind of just slow my brain down to think about what are some things that are going to pop out in my head. And the biggest thing that popped out to me was the red at the very bottom where it says Professor Jackson concludes. Anytime there is a conclusion, we have to be very careful because remember, conclusions cannot happen through correlation. All right, so I, again, just took a scrap piece of paper. I would strongly encourage you guys to do that as you're quickly reading these prompts when they give them to you. So on my scrap paper, I wrote, okay, they're saying, here's a hypothesis. If one becomes frustrated, then achievement motivation does increase. They've got a sample size of 100 people. They divided them into two groups. The first group is the very first 50 people that went in the room. And they had the easy puzzles. And then they were supposed to rate their professional goals on a scale of 1 to 7. And Professor Jackson was going to administer that. Everything on Group B, they had the second 50 people that entered the room. They had difficult puzzles, and then again, they were going to rate their professional goals, but Jim was going to administer that, the assistant. The conclusion was harder puzzles do increase achievement motivation. I put this on top of this little sign that I have in my house, chin up, Buttercup, because we always need to remember when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel like we're struggling emotionally, physically, whatever reason, whether it's school, personal life, or whatever, keep that chin up and we got to move on forward, right? Okay, so breaking down, what are they asking? Here's what it was asking us. Look at my smiley face next to the big smile. Show how each of the following aspects of the experimental design. I put in red here because this is huge. One big mistake I have often seen as a reader is kids don't answer what the question is asking them. I stress that in class, and I just want to continue to stress that here at home. It's asking you two things. And some students, when they took this particular essay, they just wrote down how it was flawed, and they forgot to write down, or they didn't know that they had to write down because they didn't read that you also had to correct the problem. So when you guys read the prompt, circle, highlight, star things that are important very quickly because you are timed. But then also when you read the instructions of what it is asking of you to do, make sure you just take a moment to see, to truly understand what they're asking. How is it flawed, and how am I going to correct the problem? And here are the 5 things you need to do. So getting started with the sample. And then what I did for each of them was I created a T-chart so you guys can go back and self-check. So the sampling, there were 2 ways you could have gone about this one. The flaw on the sample was it was either too small of a sample, it came from one class, or you could have also twisted that a bit and said, there wasn't a random sample in there. Or this is probably one you didn't do, but they would have scored it if you would have said the population wasn't defined at all. So how would I correct one? I'm going to go right over here to this side of the T-chart. The sample should represent a larger population. You could include additional classes, additional groups, additional people, ... I wasn't really specific. If I were you, I would say probably a bit more than what I've given you on your corrections, but not a whole bunch more. For the sample situation where the flaw was the population wasn't defined, you could have said something like Professor Jackson must define the population more, like the population is being tested as first-year intro to psych students. We needed to actually see by text, like we had to read what was the population. Number 2 was the assignment of participants. There was a flaw there, and the only flaw you really could have stated with the assignment of participants is there was no random assignment at all. What they did was they assigned the first 50 to one group and the rest the second group, and that's a flaw because if you're just walking in the door saying you're going to this group and we aren't randomly doing it, there's a chance that maybe, I don't know, the highest achievers weren't coming into the very end. So how do we correct it? Professor Jackson could have chosen every other participant. You're going in the easy group and you're going in the difficult group. And she wouldn't say it like that, but she would say, you're going in group A, you're going in group B. A, B, A, B. The third problem was with the dependent variable. So with the dependent variable, we have 2 flaws you could have stated, potentially. Number 1, the rating scale might not have been a very reliable rating scale, or you could have said something about the rating scale not being a valid measure of achievement. It was way too subjective. It was based on my own feelings. I might feel like I'm being an overachiever in AP psychology, but when another teacher looks at me, might say, you aren't being an overachiever at all. You haven't done this, you haven't done this, you haven't done this for your students. But because I rate myself, that makes it very subjective. That doesn't give me a very good indicator of truly, am I being an overachiever or not? So, in order to correct some of these things, the first one, the rating scale might not be reliable. You could easily correct that with saying the same person must do all the ratings. By this particular experiment having 2 people to 2 different ratings, we are not being consistent with our scoring, and we want to make sure we are consistent with that. Or the second qualification you could have said was the rating scale might not be a valid measure of achievement because it's too subjective. You could have said the scale has a predetermined qualification system. So like you basically create your own scale. This is a little bit more detailed, but the experimenter would have a very detailed qualification. If you have a 7, if you rate yourself as a 7, then it needs to be this. If you rate yourself as a 6, then it should be this, that type of thing. The fourth one is control for experimental bias. The flaw here is basically because Professor Jackson and Jim know the hypothesis. It definitely, and they are participants in running the study, it could influence how they want the study to go. So what I'm trying to say is she knew her hypothesis. She was also conducting the subjective ratings. So maybe she unconsciously, we won't say she tried it on purpose, but maybe she actually rated those people in group B a little bit better than in group A because they knew the results that they were looking for. So how do we correct that? They should have used a blind procedure where Professor Jackson or Jim know which group is what. They don't know who's in what group, and they don't know, they have no, so yeah, it's just a blind procedure where they have no idea. You could have said a double blind where the people and the experimenters don't know as well. Last but not least, I think this is the last one, confounding variables. And I wanted to just take a second to explain confounding variables again to you all. Beginning of the year, I had you guys look at yearbooks, and I wanted you to count how many people were smiling on those yearbook pages. In order to do that, then we compare, okay, after you were done, what we were going to do, and I think we ran out of time, was we were going to compare your scores to the groups, the other groups that did it as well in our class. And what we saw was not every group had, even though they were counting the same person, not every group had the same score. And the reason is because not everybody identified or defined what a smile really was. A smile could have been like this. A smile could have been like this. A smile could have been like, you know, whatever. So we needed to take a second. I wanted to just take a second to remind you that activity we did in class, because this question is saying, what are the confounding variables? Again, a reminder, any outside influence that can change the effect of the dependent variable. Confounding variables are not good. They're bad, bad, bad. That's why my face is like, ah, bad, bad, bad. So what's the control of the confounding variables in this particular study? The flaws that could impact, remember, they needed to impact a dependent variable. Could be a gender issue. Maybe that's something we can't control, and they did have, maybe girls have more of achievement motivation than boys or vice versa. The age of the experimenter or the room. So corrections to that, the experimenter should be the same for both groups so that we, again, don't have that issue that we were talking about earlier. Or you could actually, for rooms, that's something that's pretty simple. You just got to put everybody in the same room. All right. So, oh, I'm not done. Sorry. Apologize. Then we had our 3 questions at the very end, the multiple choice. Which of the following studies has had the most profound impact on ethical issues in psychological research? The answer is A, Stanley Milgram. I put a picture here so you can remember what the Milgram study was. It was the shocking study where he said, you must go on, you must go on. And the person that was in the study, this person here, really thought he was actually shocking the person in the next room as he was screaming and they were yelling, please stop. And this person here was sitting here saying, I really don't think I should go on. But the Confederates were all in on it, and they were saying, no, you must go on. So this was very unethical because it gave any of the participants a lot of hardship, a lot of stress. They truly believed that they were actually causing harm to people. And Milgram was studying how obedient people would be. I just want to quickly go through some of these other studies in case they come up for your essays that you guys are going to have. Solomon Asch study of conformity, that was the line study. He had a group around the table that were all Confederates. I'm not sure what happened there. I'm going to have to go back and look, and I hope to God that everything I recorded is not deleted. So what I was saying was Solomon Asch study, that was a study where they all went around the table and they said if they thought that the line was the same length as the line that they showed. And it was very obvious that the line was not the same length, but all the Confederates tried to get the person that was not in on it to conform to what they believed in. C and D, you don't need to know those. they were true studies, but they're not going to test you on something like that, especially on a very small FRQ where you have to know pretty broad things. So we're not going to go over that. And then Leon Fessner's cognitive dissonance, that's where he gave the $1 bill or the $20 bill for lying. Cognitive dissonance is definitely a term I would make sure that you go over and review. Cognitive dissonance was in the social psychology unit, but College Board has redone it and put it in the, I believe, motivation and emotion unit. So it's a term that could potentially come up, you guys. It's up for grabs. Cognitive dissonance is when you have a belief and and your actions, your belief and your actions do not coincide together. So you have discomfort. You have to have that discomfort. So I have a belief that smoking is wrong, but yet I smoke. If I don't feel discomfort about it and I can justify it, it's not cognitive dissonance. It's only cognitive dissonance if I actually have a uncomfortable feeling about what I did. Next one is in an experiment, which of the following variables refers to the outcome that is measured by the experimenter. That's the dependent variable. Again, the independent is controlled by the experimenter. The control group is the group that does not receive what they're investigating. I put in red down here, maybe a little bit of some explanations. Random, I think first of all, it was typed up as random on yours. I changed it to mine to say random. I'm not sure if they meant random assignment, random sample, that's too vague. And then stimulus, that's the object they're using to measure the dependent variable. Last but not least, another ethical question. Know your ethics, you guys. This one is not a specific what ethics are involved. It's just, this is more of a basic, what happens with, which is the following best describes the response of members in the APA to ethical issues. The only one that really makes sense is E. They have developed codes of ethics for humans as well as animals. But I can't stress and emphasize enough to you guys that you do need to know those ethics. I would not be surprised if they ask you an ethical question just based on the history of them doing that. And they find that being very important as a, so know not just that there are ethics, but what are the top 5 that I have posted on many sites for yourself. So I hope this is helpful for you. Even if you can't join us at the Zoom, I still hope that this is helpful for you. I'd love to see you guys on Thursday. We're going to be going over sensation and perception and learning terms. I'm going to create a Quizlet for that, and then I'll post that on my site so that you have an opportunity to go over those terms as well. Again, if you want me to look at any of your answers, please do so. I would be happy to do so for you. And then don't forget to do your cupcake review and get those turned into me. I would really appreciate that. Have a great day, and we will see you on Thursday.